Hi guys, you're on vrm24.com and today we are going to disassemble Lenovo Tab P11 Pro 2nd generation. First of all, we need to remove the card tray. For this we use a special tool and we push out the memory card tray. After that, we need to heat the surface of the display to a temperature of about 70 Celsius degree or 160 degree Fahrenheit. For this, we use a heating mat and we recommend using a heating mat or a separator. Since this assembly has a third maximum difficulty, we will need to detach the display. This is a very difficult thing to do. It is quite difficult to heat the display evenly and it is extremely easy to damage the display. So after 10 to 15 minutes of heating, we take a thin plastic film. We insert it into the gap between the housing and the display and carefully run it along the edge, cutting off the adhesive backing. We need to be really careful in the front camera area, we need to be careful on the edges. We don't need to use any force. Detaching the display is a time-consuming and labor-intensive procedure. And after about 3 to 5 minutes, we can open and leave the display. Please note on which side we have the cable. And basically, as shown in this video, we can carefully lift with one hand and with the other hand we unscrew one screw. Then we remove the bracket and we disconnect the connector of the display cable. And now we can carefully remove actually the display itself. Then we need to disconnect the battery connectors. Yes, in our case we have two battery connectors. First, we use a Phillips screwdriver 1.5 mm or Phillips #30. We unscrew the screws and accordingly we disconnect the connector itself with a non-metal tool. In our video we skipped one of the cables, mistakenly thinking that this is the interboard cable that goes from the subboard to the motherboard. And we also disconnect the connector to the keyboard. After that, we try to remove the screws and detach the speaker at the bottom on the right side. So we remove a few screws and we realize that we can't detach the speaker. We can't remove any elements until we unscrew the screws around the edge and remove the frame that holds the speakers, motherboard and other elements. We carefully unscrew all the screws on the frame. Please note, in this part we mistakenly skip these screws. However, we will discover the mistake later and we can remove the screws, detach the frame, but we continue to remove the screws. It is really important to place the screws on a special surface in a certain order so that nothing gets mixed up. We try to detach the frame that holds the various elements. To do this, we use a thin plastic tool. Carefully we insert it into the gap, run it along the edge, detaching the clips. And as I said earlier, we missed 3 screws that we need to unscrew to detach the frame. So we unscrew the screws on one side and at these locations we unclip the clips and thereby detach the frame. We also need to be careful in the front camera area and on the corners, and we can carefully remove the frame. After that, we move on to unscrewing the screws. Carefully remove the screws that hold the speaker. Carefully remove the screws that hold the small board with a charging port. We disconnect the charging port bracket. Then we move on to removing the screws of the speaker at the top right side. We can try to disconnect the interboard cable connector. We also have one small bracket. Let's try to detach the cable. We carefully peel it off in the places where it interferes with us. And we can continue unscrewing the screws that secure the speaker. So we are unscrewing the screws. We are trying to lift the speaker up. And we would better remove the screws that hold the vibration motor in place. We also unscrew the screws, remove the bracket and try to lift and remove the speaker. We find the right place where we can hook, lift, and we cannot remove the speaker, because the speaker is not only connected by spring contacts. From the speaker goes a cable under the motherboard, and there is a contact pad which is connected to the motherboard with a spring contacts. Well, but we can detach a small board with a charging port. After that, we need to try to remove the speaker on the bottom right side. First, we try to pry off the cable. We try to pick it up from the edge. However, it doesn't work. This is a common mistake because first we need to lift the speaker from the back side, and from the back side of the cable gently hook and lift the contact pad. And we move on to disconnecting the battery connector, which we mistakenly thought that the interboard cable connector. Therefore, we should have disconnected the battery connector earlier. So we unscrew the screw, remove the bracket and carefully disconnect the battery connector. As we can see, the connector is bent and taped. Pay attention to it. Now it doesn't interfere with us, but when we detach the battery, we will have to unglue it. After that, we unscrew one screw fixing the front camera. We remove the bracket, disconnect the connector. We carefully hook the front camera by the base and unglue it and put it aside. Then we unscrew the screws that hold the motherboard, that hold the speaker, that hold the small cover with antennas. We unscrew them, put them aside on a special surface, put the screws in a certain order so that we don't mix up anything when reassembling. So unscrew the screws and we can try to detach the cover on the left side of the top part, which hides the rear camera. And we can detach the rear camera, gently hook the connector, lift it up and pull the camera aside. After that, we can disconnect the interboard cable connector. Carefully peel off the cable connector. We carefully try to lift and remove the speaker. As we can see, this speaker doesn't have a cable, only the contact pad is located on the speaker itself. Then we disconnect the connectors of the two coaxial cables on the motherboard. We carefully disconnect the connectors. we see that there is nothing in the way on the motherboard, that we have disconnected all the connectors, and try to carefully lift and remove the motherboard. We unbend the cables so that they don't interfere with us, and we remove the motherboard. So after that, we can finally try to detach the speaker on the top right side. We lift up the speaker, run a tool under the cable and the contact pad and carefully detach the speaker. We look at the way the cable is glued, no need to force, no need to hurry, just be as careful as possible. Let's see how we can properly detach the cable. We use the tool that is more convenient for us. Carefully pry off the edge of the contact pad and remove the speaker. Then we move on to unscrewing the screws of the speaker, which is located on the bottom left side. We use a 1.5 mm Phillips screwdriver or Phillips #30. If the screws are not well magnetic, we can additionally use a magnetizer. And after unscrewing the screws, we can carefully detach the speaker. Finding the right place where we can hook carefully, no need to hurry, no need to force. As always, it's really important to find the right place where we can hook, lift and effortlessly remove the speaker. So we're trying to detach the speaker. As we realize on one side it is a little bit glued on. We gently pull it out. This speaker also doesn't have a cable, only a contact pad. After that, we disconnect the interboard cable connector on the small board with the card connector. After that, we disconnect the interboard cable connector on the small board with a card connector. We disconnect the connectors of the two coaxial cables so that they don't interfere with us. And then we can carefully lift up and remove the small board with a card connector. And then we move on to detaching the battery. But before we remove the battery, of course, we will better unstick and detach the keyboard connector cable. First, we unscrew the two screws holding the cover. We detach the small locking cover in this part. And we need to detach the keyboard connector itself. See how it's held in place. See how we can gently lift it up. Let's see what we need to unglue. Carefully unstick in the areas that we can unstick. Lift in the places where the connector is lifted. And carefully, without hurry, remove the cable with the connector for the keyboard. And finally, we move on to detach the battery. So we need to unwrap the two black tabs to the side, and we also need to peel off the adhesive covering so that we don't accidentally tear off the tabs and we don't have to remove the battery for a long time. We carefully unwrap the tabs and peel off the adhesive coating. Carefully, not hurriedly, we peel off the covering so that it doesn't interfere with us when pulling the adhesive tape. We unwrap the tabs, remove the covering, and then gently pull the tabs to the side, pulling out the adhesive tape. We pulled the adhesive tape out on one side and repeat the same procedure on the other side. Detaching the battery has never been so satisfying in our work. So we remove the battery gently and effortlessly. As you can see, we also need to remember to unstick the battery cable. Well, this is the end of our disassembly. Thank you for watching and see you around or in the new videos.
Okay guys, now we're done. Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel or read our articles on our website. Take care of yourself and until next video.